You die because you lived. You rot because you were. Punishing Grey Raven is a weed among the towering shadows in the field of gachas, insignificant and unimportant. Some would consider it dead, and yet I exult over its death, because from this I know that it once existed. Some would consider it dying, a living corpse in perpetual decay, and yet I exult over its decay, because from this I know that it has not been empty. This is how the story of Cinder Burns begins, setting the stakes in just 10 seconds. But does merely being alive equate to having a soul? How does a soul be soulful in the world painted crimson by the outbreak of the virus known as punishing? How does one's soul ignite? Certainly, Kuro Games, the developer of PGR, has been bleeding with soul, passion, and incredible creativity, from their gameplay to story, however unnoticed it may be. For it is this game where a group of people singing around a pot of rice cemented itself as one of the best pieces of fiction I have ever read. It is this game where a young man's life, drenched in deep black, gets turned into a blank white over and over again, where he is left with the question, why am I dead now? Where only the memories of his past regrets surface, not his name nor his identity. He has been reborn. Cinder Burns is the most soulful chapter in PGR, Noan the most soulful character, and in the next 2 hours, you'll know exactly why his soul is worth exalting. For the longest time, it has been notoriously difficult to argue anything in favor of a gacha game. That is probably why you rarely see any critique videos of even the popular ones. The only one I could find was from Genshin. Seeing the length of this video, I questioned myself whether or not I am doing that precise thing. I am not a fan of the medium of gacha and the structure it conventionally follows. So this discussion will be just as much for the fan as much as it is for someone who has never heard or cared. This video started with the idea of me just trying to put forward a case for my distaste at punishing Grey Raven's story being reduced to mere haha depression. This unfortunate reductive way of discussing such things, even among the fans, leads to categorically undermining all gachas as a piece of work not deserving any further introspection. The quality of the discourse surrounding any singular aspect like story, gameplay, or systems of a gacha game are almost overwhelmingly restricted to the binaries of bad and not bad. The standards are irreprehensibly low, where most are conditioned to criticize it as this is better than others and not that this is good. I will go through the entire story and dissect every nook and cranny of its themes as they come up. I'll also talk about things that could have been improved upon. To be clear, I will be gushing about the smallest of things, like the implication of what his regret resurfacing first thing after being reborn, and how seeing a first aid kit was the first thing to bring back even more memories, highlighting his deepest torment in regret. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let's look closely, one by one, the ingredients they've placed into this grey pot to prepare for the moment it overflows with golden brilliance. Speaking of grey, here is the Grey Raven Commandant. Young Man A, as he so delightfully declared his name to be because of his amnesia, is patching him up with a first aid kit. He was taken to a refugee base by a bunch of constructs when he woke up in a dark shack after his rebirth, his mind only consisting regret and pain, his mechanoid body unfamiliar. Though they were suspicious of a stranger, they gave him the benefit of the doubt and conjectured that his amnesia is due to his mind deviation. That's something a construct faces often in this world. Humans can become constructs at the low cost of their actual lives to reside in a mechanical body that resists the virus plaguing the world. The commandants are humans. Constructs need them to keep resisting the virus and stabilize their mind. This was unknown to the construct, Young Man A2. Okay, the name is a bit cringe, but it made me chuckle. However, Young Man A seems familiar to the commandant, and when the commandant tells him that, he asks to confirm this question burning in his mind instinctually, whether or not people had to be wary around him. This arouses an interesting point to his character. that he worries, or rather is terrified of the possibility of being the bad guy among a group causing trouble for them. Afterwards, he starts thinking about how he came to be and his family when he subconsciously roots for a little girl in the base when she cries for a pen and paper to draw. Seeing this, the commandant gives him a pen and paper as well and asks him to note down things he remembers. This makes him happy. And that was the first story node. I want you to remember all of the key things addressed here. The first is regret, then his relation to medicine, his apprehension of people being wary of him, and drawing. They lay this out from the beginning, all naturally. So let's see how these develop. That night, as he starts writing, his memory jolts with a sense of longing for drawing. Somehow his words turn into shapes, and then drawings, as if it's second nature to him. This awakens some memories of his childhood as he thinks back. They are in the lower levels of Asslam, the train. His mom tears up all of his drawings, even if he does everything she asks of him. Her reasoning being that drawing won't help him survive in this world of punishing. She wants him to settle in a medical sector, or at least near a CPF, that is a central purification filter. Apparently young man A fought with not only other people, but also guards from the upper level because they badmouth his mother. To reprimand him, his mother sends him to Rachel, the leader of the crew in the lower level, to learn how the real world functions, which will lead him to discard his naive fantasies. At least this is what his mother thinks. Rachel is very respected among everyone here. She sends young man A to a secret book storage for work. It's appropriate as he is 9 only. So Rachel thinks that being among books and learning anything and everything is what is best for him. And this turns out to be a paradise, an escape for him, a free pond for him to swim in, a place where he can be himself. And it is here where he learns about the stories where justice prevails. He wants to be someone like the hero from the stories, or even just to fight alongside the hero. This routine of working in the book storage goes on for about 2 years. Some apprehension does start to rise in him, however. He is continuously conscious of whether this paradise is too good to be true, and if it will trouble his mom. But he still secretly seeks her approval for his naive dreams. Alright, let me talk about how I'm going to structure such a long story. We are going to be dividing it up into arcs. The first arc being the mom arc. There will be 3 more arcs, but let's talk about his mom's character a bit. Her name is Julie. She's never without her mask, to the point of not even eating nor washing her face in front of her 9-year-old son. So he has never even seen her face. Years ago, a riot between the lower class and the upper class within the train caused his father's death, which led her to adopting the mask. His father was a part of the aristocrats as well. She was pregnant with him during then. She gets ridiculed for her job, which I initially thought was prostitution because of this line, but she is accused of other shady things as well. That's all of what we know of her past. This is all told to Noan by Julie when he stumbles upon her and Rachel having a talk in the dead of night in a fit of anger laced with sorrow. After taking him to his room, she explains her reasoning for being way too hell-bent for making him understand the cruelties of this world. Even though her tone is reprimanding, the way the dialogue is forged makes it seem more like she is saying this as a plea for her son to console herself for her deeds. She refrains from saying anything more than the bare necessities. As if to hold herself together, she keeps repeating in a monotonous tone, "You should sleep now." I love this specific thing here as it accentuates the desperate tonality of the entire conversation that is going to ensue. When no one tries to console and question her, that's when she bursts out. But she's still trying to be as calm as possible, expressing regret that he was brought into this world like this, and that should he have been born elsewhere by someone else, then he probably would have been treated differently. He probably could have made friends, as he is ostracized due to being Julie's son, being an accomplice for the ones that caused all of the problems for the lower class. This all feels very natural and organic. She does not want her son to see something that he might end up losing. She tries to distance herself from him, making him hate his mother because he does not want him to regret her loss, just as how she lost the normality of having a son. The mask is a physical cage that is hiding her real self, something she put on just to separate herself from the reality of her past, selling her future, as she says, for his. She herself had dreams just like her son, but what can she do now? She has to deal with her regret, I want to put attention towards how his mother never says to accept the regret. It's just that she's left with no choice but to do so. When she felt like she can't keep calm anymore and is about to burst, guess what she does? She keeps repeating again, in a monotonous tone. You should sleep now. There's a level of exceptionality to the writing here, in setting the tone without explicitly stating how the characters are feeling. Just through formation of the text alone, that does not even have voices backing it up. The boy, in a state of incomprehension from all this pressure, asks his mom if she would stay with him. She, without a single word, just lies next to him. This accentuates the overwhelming sense of pressure both of them are feeling right now. The longing for normality, free from her mistakes, and then it brilliantly transitions to the present where this little girl is singing the exact same song. That was a stellar scene unpacking and unveiling the trepidations of young man A. However, it's not solely limited to that, as the foundational groundwork laid within that conversation has a profound impact that is pertinent to the main themes as well. One more thing to address here is that does it not seem coincidental that the random girl just happened to sing the same song? You can overlook this simply through the notion that it was added to embellish the scene, but I think there are other ways to consider here as well. Kuro Games does put an emphasis on the cultural side of things as well, weaving it with the internal and external narratives. We see this in Survival Lusum, where a group of people know a folk song and then sing together, which is then later made into an actual song. The lyrics being taken directly from the game, and then they canonically use the voice actor of the character that sings the song as well. The same thing is done here, as a future character knows this song too, and then it is made into an actual song by the devs. So I'd say it is not completely outlandish that a random character would know this song, but this culture has been ingrained into the game, where people tend to value music. Anyways, it's great that the flashback isn't secluded to itself, as this thought still lingers within his mind. During that flashback, at one point, his mom says that for ordinary people like herself to be a hero, to bring about a change, they need to pay a steep price, and that price may hurt others around them. For her case, it was selling her possibility to be with him, thus hurting him. Still thinking about this, he asks the girl, Lillian, about it. That ordinary people would have a higher chance of falling on the wrong side of justice, since they have nothing that would help them. I would like to hold off on discussing this more until I provide more context, but to touch on it a little now, I have not emphasized this much as of yet, but everyone has been very wary of young man A, thinking that he might be connected to the Ascendants, basically bad guys. However, he is unwilling to find himself on the side of the Ascendants, as he also says that the idea of being with the bad guys terrifies him. Doesn't that mean that he, as a normal dude, is falling on the wrong side of justice? They are planting some seeds basically. The little girl also points out that young man A might not remember his name, possibly due to him hating his name, and that people tend to suppress what they hate instinctually. This already has some parallels to how his mother hides her face because she hates her past. They are already adding to that conversation, as I said. It laid the groundwork for the developments of the themes of this chapter. Afterwards, they are going to a medical center nearby to check out what's been happening with young man A. So it seems a construct named Talbot is facing some issues there. The gang goes to save him, seeing that the only survivor left is Lithos. Now this design is sick as fuck, and also this is supposed to be mainly a story critique, but can we talk about how satisfying the revving sounds are when you play young man A? It's screaming, dude. When they take shelter in the base, they talk about how becoming an Ascendant might be the only path to salvage humanity. Talbot is the only one vouching for it though, as Ascendants are naturally immune to the virus. He argues that there is not enough time left to think about alternatives, and then he is reproached by everyone, saying that he's too naive when thinking about power. Some small snippets of Young Man A's past are highlighted here, like when Talbot brings up Asslam and when they compare the Ascendants to the blessing boxes there. Glad they are telling the stories of his past in chunks, as it makes it way more digestible. Especially since a lot of what they talk about here refers to the setting of Asslam, which is done immensely well. I'd argue that might even be one of the most believable forms of communal conflict I've seen in fiction. This might be information overload, but I feel that there's a desperate need to highlight how intricate and fascinating the setting Kuro have crafted is. So here goes. Let me tell you the intricacy of Asslam. Asslam is a colossal train that could be likened to a small moving town really. It's centered around commerce and trading. It is mainly divided up into two classes, the upper class and the lower class. The upper class mainly does the trading and leads a luxurious life, while the lower class are the slaves and works tooth and nail to keep the train running. On the surface, this seems a very stereotypical setting for oppression, but it's the farthest thing from that. We can talk about the upper class later, as it won't become relevant for a while. So the lower class contains most of the population of the train. They are separated into different parts. The commoner carriage makes up the hub with the logistics crew, maintenance crew, cargo crew, and the bumblebees. The majority among these are the cargo crew. They primarily deliver goods and trade with different bases and factories where groups of people have set up a place to live. But it's not limited to aiding the survival of the homeless. They also recycle items no longer needed in one base and sell it to another. In some cases, they also carry out rescue missions in dire situations. They are well respected within the desolate land of PGR now, as they are one of the few ways people can actually acquire reliable sources for their survival. This led to the position of being a cargo crew member an aspiration for reverence as well. Apart from securing stability, this ethically just position of being a hero that brings light to the desperation became a dream for people young and old. It's remarkable how they managed to create this crew that is not only providing for the people, but it also has a ripple effect, as their existence in itself inspires people towards becoming a part of that crew in a multifaceted way. This is where it starts to get more interesting. Since the cargo crew brings in so much revenue for the aristocrats, they themselves have a reason to keep it flourishing. In comes the blessing boxes. People in the train put their own stuff in these boxes, from different resources to supplies. The cargo crew goes out to sell them then, and the revenue is split between the main seller, the cargo crew themselves, and the aristocrats of course. Some of these would contain a special card to board the train on the lower levels. Now this is very important. Within this land of dirt resources, when random scavengers want to go to a reservation center or a base, they need to pass through a screening of sort. The bases tend to prefer people who have skills that would be useful in keeping the base alive. So oftentimes, they refuse scavengers who can't aid in any tangible way. Even if they are nice enough to take you in, they might not be keeping you for long if you don't provide anything at all, since food and supplies are very limited. Most of the time though, it is not even that they aren't capable of absolutely anything. The specific base they went to simply does not need whatever they are capable of. In this state, traveling far away to another base in this dangerous world would be far too risky, which is what, along with the possible aspiration of being affiliated with the cargo crew, tempts the blessing boxes to people outside the train. In a way, you could liken it to a form of gambling as well. You can never know what is inside the box until you open them, and if you don't get the blessing card, well then, buy another one. With that, you can either board the train to go someplace, or join the train as part of any crew, depending on your expertise. This seems like a win for all, right? As the upper level is gaining more money, while the lower level gains more people to aid in their work. And the ones who join can also become a part of the revered cargo crew. Even the elders and kids can help with making the blessing boxes themselves, which young man A also did a few times when he was a kid. Does seeing a gigabrain concept like this, where so many layers go out and converge from one point, not leave you with the biggest grin? It sure does for me. In this way, the blessing boxes devised by the upper classes started getting traction, both internally and externally, thinking it would be a blessing for all. So good how the upper classes are making use of this aspiration among outsiders that they themselves created, and the situation outside to make a system of reproduction of capital like this. They give an idea that is built on the foundation of being too good to be true. This is also likened to the screening of the ascendants as well, where the brutal filtering rewards you with seemingly ceaseless power, but ultimately you are shackled to the punishing, as then you have to be a slave for it. This is so meticulously done, it's unbelievably impressive. And it's made even more believable through the incorporation of the bumblebees. They are the people that actually have no particular expertise whatsoever but still get the special cards. So the aristocrats made this group to be a ragtag group of anyone without a stable job. Of course, they still need to work on the train as a citizen of it, so they generally just help with some farming, removing ruins and debris from the roads that the cargo crew travels in, work as ad hoc mercenaries, and other miscellaneous tasks. But since Bumblebee accepts without screening at all, there are just some who just are naturally brash, uncooperative, and outright bad at doing what they're supposed to do, which causes the reputation of the entire train to be hurt. How cool is that they have this ego because of this reverence that is built upon them as well, as a large part of the cargo crew shows some distaste that some part of their once revered position of being a cargo crew member is mired in mud because of these bumblebees, just due to them both being associated with Asslam. The bumblebees also think that the cargo crew gets some preferential treatment, emphasizing more animosity. 2 years go by and the lower levels of Asslam becomes intensely crowded, so much so that it's nigh unlivable. The competition for work has been fierce as a result, which affects their wages as well. Some people during this time use their connection to join the upper class guards. This naturally causes another level of resentment from the lower level people as well. I just love how one small system of blessing boxes spawned all of these layers and conflicts. The resentment and internal discord within the members are done with utmost tenacity, making sure every piece is interlaced with each other. Some parts do feel a bit expository and they could have been done through conversations to make it feel more natural, but with this level of detail and intricacy, I was thoroughly engaged in learning about this hellhole, as literally every group involved had cogent and convincing reasoning for their circumstances, so I can overlook that slightly. Anyways, as the population in the lower level continues to grow, the guards are given full authority to moderate the workers with the ultimatum, get the job done. So, of course, they would start to find a way that they could reap some benefits. They started a pay-by-quota system in the industrial carriage. What this means is, should even one of them fail to meet the daily quota, then none of them get paid. The collective livelihood of all hangs in the balance based on the performance of each individual. It is inevitable that immense discontent arises among the people of lower levels if someone doesn't finish their work. The collective anger and even aggression is directed at the underperforming individuals. Adding even more to their frustrations is that when the guards don't pay if someone fails to meet the quota, the guards actually keep the money themselves. The intermediaries there also become a point of hate then, as not only this, the working conditions there become inhumane. The guards can willingly subject the lower level workers to physical abuse, provocation, and long hours of labor in an environment reeking with sweat and excrement. All for what? Minimal and unguaranteed pay. To exacerbate this even further, yes, it keeps going, there is also a policy in Asslam where if someone were to die, a compensation would be paid to their family. But if they don't have any family left, or the family members are kids, the guards also pocket the money themselves. This goes unnoticed as the aristocrats don't meticulously track the lower level citizens. That job belongs to the logistics crew. This cauldron boiling with so many ingredients geared towards a communal conflict themselves lay a foundation for something that's beyond what it may initially seem. Since the people see so much misfortune stemming directly from either their own companions or the guards, it's easy to deem them as the main perpetrator of their misfortune. In this way, a lot of the times, people get over seemingly pointless arguments due to all the pent-up stress and disdain, that it is natural to overlook how the upper classes are the ones setting up all these pieces like a chess game, one by one to monopolize their authority. As when there's so much against you, how can you truly define what is the worst of them all? Recently, I had the chance to learn about the tactics of colonial rulers employed to assert their dominance, and this is very reminiscent of what happens there. The one with power sets up systems where the oppressed have internal conflicts among them, thus diverting the resentment away from the actual problem. It's genius, actually. So this tension born from their resentment towards each other and a growing sense of helplessness becomes particularly palpable when the upper class begins to play luxurious music, signaling the start of a party intended to symbolize happiness. This contrast accentuates the stark disparity between their lives and those of the lower level residents. This moment is brilliant, just to really set in how multi-layered the oppression they face is. And the fun thing they do is, when amongst all of this, Rachel, the leader, tells all of them to stay strong, that the real reason for their sufferings is the aristocrats, not themselves, because obviously the people are quick to blame themselves, and that they're preparing for a revolt that will end this oppression. Then all of them start singing along with the melody of the aristocrats, but the lyrics are parodied to be full of profanity. I love this scene as it's kind of batshit, but it also highlights so much of the chaos and ludicrousness that's going down on the lower level. But tell me, does any of this relate to the punishing at all? Does any of this relate to the apocalypse at all? No. When you think of a post-apocalyptic setting, the narrative usually makes the apocalypse itself the antagonist. And that is the case for the majority of Punishing Grey Raven stories as well. But what if the apocalypse wasn't the enemy during an apocalypse? Cinder Burns is this oddity for PGR. It pushes back the cause of the apocalypse and leverages this chaotic backdrop to tell a profoundly human story, one that's both familiar and in many ways a cliche, yet brilliantly executed. Putting the most banal thing in the most unbanal setting is how you enrich the depth and believability of the world. And personally, this is one of my favorite forms of stories. There are so many conflicts, a lot of them created by the upper classes, yes, but they are not the sole perpetrator. They are causing a lot of suffering themselves as well. This multi-layered oppression is laid out in such a stellar fashion, where the context of the apocalypse just supplements it. It's still a very real and believable scenario. This is what I love about fictional worlds, where they can make something so outlandish as a parasite that turns machines into killing monsters and then evolves themselves into humanoids to aid in a scenario that's grounded in every bit of reality. Every layer means something. They all offer something more than what they initially are. Back to the present. The ones who started the talk about the blessing boxes are cargo crew members themselves. At first I thought, wow, such a coincidence that there just happened to be a cargo crew member here. But as I thought more about it, it did make sense. Since young man A himself, a member of the train, was nearby, it makes sense that others would be likely to be nearby as well. Anyways, they start saying that the revolt apparently was a failure because there was someone who backstabbed their leader, Rachel. And then, here it is. They directly mention him. His name is Noan. Noan was deemed a traitor. He apparently shot Rachel. To him, it felt utterly unbelievable. Ashlar, a prominent aristocrat with high standing, had shifted the blame entirely onto Noan, saying that he was the cause of the failure, in an attempt to save his own ass. Remember Noan's initial fear of becoming a part of the bad guys, and the theme of letting down his own people? The pieces of the puzzle are beginning to fit together. We are getting hints of how that started now. His mind goes crazy at this, his vision distorts, and we are left with fireflies. This was pretty cool. Noan's entire world was shattering as he killed his mentor, his captain, his regret immense. So what was the shady stuff that Noan's mother did? She works in the logistics department as she works on the financial records. So what she did was she tampered with these records to pocket a sizable amount of resources. Rachel and even the aristocrats were her accomplices. The word of this seemingly got out, and then people started to treat them harshly, which is expected. We don't learn the specifics now, but you are given enough information to piece it out yourself. I haven't mentioned it previously, but there was a point where no one contemplated how Rachel got all of the stuff she did, as everyone else had to fight among themselves to get even some resources. When asked, she always replied that she had his ways. Now that you know Julie's circumstances and that she worked with Rachel, things start to clear up. When Noan was 12, Julie got caught tampering with the resources. The guards took her away. Even though Julie tells him that she would come back, she doesn't. An entire day goes by. Noan, in a state of desperation, goes out to find where they took his mom. He starts to ask a bunch of people, though they still ridicule him and his mom both. This old dude named Ed finally helps him. Noan is then pointed to the cell where they kept his mom. Oh, what the fuck? Yeah, this was unnerving. They have a heart-to-heart conversation, which is good. The entire conversation basically solidifies what I previously discussed about Julie. Her saying, "Do you recognize me?" after taking off her mask was a bit heartbreaking. Learning that his mom is drip-feeding her soul to death and her regret of not being able to raise Noan ideally due to her own fault, regretting how people avoid and shit-talk him just due to being her son. All of this fucks him up. And then she questions Noan. If he thinks what she did is wrong, she would want validation from the one she was doing it for, knowing it's a futile attempt. But she is left with no other choice. This point about validation is particularly noteworthy. Her soul is filled to the brim with regret after years of suppressing it. Even a slight nudge, and it will start to seep out. Of course, she would want to cling on to that hope, that what she poured her soul over for these years, for the one person, would accept what she did, even if her rationality knows of her wrongdoings. It's her subconscious that craves for this normalcy of being a mother to her child. Man, this is just sad, as Noan does not even say anything, but just nods, indicating his disapproval of his mom and showing how he's dealing with all of this even more. The use of empty words is apparent throughout the entire chapter for Noan specifically. It captures his emotional state very well. Julie's inner turmoil between her consciousness and subconsciousness hits his mark when she told Noan that she hoped he would survive the apocalypse, and if, in the distant future, many years later, he still believed her actions were wrong, then she didn't seek forgiveness or justification. Instead, she simply urged him to not make the same mistakes she did, the themes of regret in full display. Ultimately, she's taken away and dies the next day. The official cause is food poisoning, which Noan finds odd. This brings about an emotional baggage for Noan. He, understandably being a child, has a very difficult time grasping how to even deal with everything. This one time he's told, "It's hard without your mom, right?" And that really got me, because he was just flabbergasted, not knowing how he should reply. He tries to find some escape in the book storage. Rachel was out on a mission during all of this. When she comes back and finds out that Julie died, she is completely distraught. She then told Noan that he must live on, to honor Julie no matter what. Noan is taken in as Rachel's apprentice, and for the next few years, Noan is put through very rigorous combat and physical training, both for being a part of the cargo crew officially and also for the revolt. This node ends off with a training montage. All in all, this marks the end of Julie's arc, and signifies the prelude to what's going to come. Is it long? Yes, but I think most of it was very natural and told in a way that is digestible to the player. If I were to change something about it, I would probably space out the stuff with the bumblebees a little to the next arc, as that is barely relevant. Yes, it adds more to the flaming pot of conflicts, but I think the rest do a perfectly satisfactory job without their inclusion. I am pleasantly shocked at there being no sign of the virus causing havoc at all. This is seldom in PGR, as every chapter previously had this ad nauseum structure of the virus causing suffering and then them overcoming it with some losses. It always felt like they were trying to further the plot, rather than focus on the more nuanced effects the setting can have that is an incidental consequence and not a direct impact. Think of how intricate the system of Asslam is. That could have been established with or without the virus directly, but the apocalypse just supplements it. I'm thoroughly enjoying this deep dive they are doing. His mother also was an excellent product of this very setting. Her motivations and pleas are engaging, and most importantly, acts as a catalyst for the theme surrounding how Noan grows as a character. Although the major complaint I have so far is that it has been a bit too setting focused. I would like more things related to the characterization. Yes, they need to build a proper setup for that, but I'd say they could incorporate it subtly here and there, preferably through dialogue. Noan's conversation with his mom adds the foundation for complexity, but we've only seen Noan suffer. And while there have been parts where no one thinks about how to deal with the situation, I wouldn't call any of those that noteworthy. For example, they've been talking quite often about how Noan is always alienated. I would have liked to see more of how he deals with this, especially as a kid. You'd think that would have a profound impact on him, right? Apart from these issues, I'm thoroughly enjoying the approach they are taking with this chapter. There have only been one battle mode so far, which might get a little mundane, but I think this was the best approach they could have taken. Since I have an affinity towards interesting subsettings that play off of the main setting, this is just a product of how a gacha is typically structured. It's both a positive and a negative. If you were to focus on a singular aspect of a larger world that's part of a grand narrative with intricate craftsmanship, you are bound to have long lines of text explaining the scenario. This evidently seems unreasonable to fit into a dialogue, so it becomes akin to exposition bomb. But focusing on larger settings limits the thorough dissection only possible in a smaller setting to a believable scale. Anyway, moving on, we are going to enter Field's arc. I did say Cinder Burns is a profoundly human story. The seeds for that took a while to get set up, and as if to directly address the complaints I just said, from here on out they start to focus more on how Noan deals with his scenario. Thus my reasoning for calling it a prelude. Noan one day is going back after finishing up training. Along the way he hears people continuing to shit talk and estrange him. He has come to do his best to ignore it. He then sees a guard abusing another kid. Apparently scenes like this have become quite frequent, as the bumblebees have been joining the ranks of the upper level guards through connections and favors. They act freely to abuse the cargo crew, which they were discontent with before, while the victims can do nothing. Anyways, this kind of boiled Noan's blood as the kid was physically quite frail. He fires back at them in a certain anime-esque style. As the fight was getting heated up, Noan was saved by some of the cargo captains, Nino and Shauna. An interesting thing to note here is though, that when the guard was being ganged up, he used the same bargaining chip of Noan being the son of Julie to save him. I love that even the guards think that this would be a good motivator for the lower levels, flaming the internal conflict even more. Then the captain starts scolding Noan for making a scene when it didn't need to be. The boy's name is Field, and apparently he got clapped by a gardener robot a while ago, losing his mother in the process. And they joined the train recently. So recently in fact that his dad hasn't even been able to secure a bed for them. After the crowd dispersed, Aunt Hill came up to check up on Noan and the other boy. Hill apologizes as she was too scared to come to help. I love that this reminds Noan of his mom, as she at one point told Noan that just because people don't step up to stop something doesn't mean that they support it. It plays into the factor that people just don't get over an irreparable void like losing your parents. It's natural that almost everything, even when you just shot someone, get reprimanded for whatever it is always in the corner of your mind. I'll talk more extensively about Noan's character in the future. Ironically, just as I think this, they do something that makes me question that exact thought. So after a few days of this event, the cargo crew bring in Noan to have a talk saying that they were really impressed with him. And I'm like, what? Didn't they just tell Noan to stop his baseless heroics? This shift in reception is even more baffling to me, as they say that they will now accept Noan for his own, thinking that he's nothing like his mother. Noan visibly did start to get more and more perceptive of the world around him, thus being kind of dumbfounded at this. But what bothers me is, why did they just suddenly change his reception of him? They say that they assumed he was only being kept around them because Rachel was close with Julie. But now they see that Noan is righteous, but they've seen him intensely training for months now. I don't think this one event is enough to change his perception among nearly all of the lower levels, especially since they did say that scenes like this are quite common nowadays. One argument might be that it could be something akin to herd mentality, that no one really did dislike Noan, but they shared this sentiment on the surface because everyone around them was doing it, which is what prompted this quick shift. And this would be reasonable if this chapter had left even the minute-to-minute details of complexity up to interpretation. But it does not. Case in point, literally right before this scene, Rachel confirms the guard that apparently abused that kid was a fake. Since there are always new people coming, and due to the bumblebees constantly shifting and some joining the upper ranks, you just don't have enough time to know everyone personally, especially if you are a guard, since you can see their faces and then they don't have IDs as they're wearing this armor all the time. So neither the guards themselves know everyone among them, nor the lower levels. This actually leads to people stealing suits. The perks of it have led to many fakes being among the guards, and this is also a very frequent occurrence. See, This is completely believable with what they've established so far. They've set out the reasons someone would want power, even who would want power, and what they would do with them too. And placed it well within the boiling pot of complexity that is Asslam. This level of attention to detail makes me question how they just suddenly accept Noan. That is so far the biggest complaint I have with this narrative. Anyways, in between these points, Noan and Field become friends. He's like the only same-aged kid on the train that he knows, so Noan takes Field to his safe haven, the book storage. They spend a lot of time there. We see them talking about interesting things in their lives, like Noan being accepted into their ranks now and what they did recently. I don't have any major issues with how this is played out, though Field's personality isn't really appealing to me, so it's difficult for me to be too into it. However, I can understand how they'd become close. But all good things have their thorns. The cargo crew members, Shauna and Nino, now give Noan a pep talk. They were knitting sweaters during this, which was cute. So they tell him to be wary of Field. The reason being, his dad, Bancroft. He joined the cargo crew recently, but apparently he has been snitching them, losing resources and giving the aristocrats info about them. And that not just him, but a lot of people are snitching these days. Along with the fake guards I just mentioned, the aristocrats are taking advantage of this chaos. They have devised up a system laden with the intention of communal conflict, making them turn against one another, thus loosening their unity. That being a system of rewards. It operates on the principle that those who report the instances of theft, negligence, or any perceived injustices are going to get certain benefits. The guards will not only throw the perpetrator off the train, but the resources that they have will be shared among the ones who snitched, the aristocrats, and the guards too. Now this gives the people in the lower level a proper incentive to snitch, to loosen themselves from the rope that unites them, for their own and their family's well-being, which is exactly what Bancroft represents. Field needs a lot of medication to combat his frailty, and to accommodate that need, Bancroft has been snitching to the aristocrats, giving them secret info about the lower levels. Their pep talk leaves a distasteful sense in Noan, as Noan feels that this is the same that happened with him and his mom, where he was ostracized due to their alleged accusation of his mother. See, this is what I wanted when they took him in. I can understand why he didn't immediately rebuke them, as he himself thought during that time that his mom did things that were unethical, but they were just not enough from the perspective of the other side. Anyways, it's an interesting cycle that what happened with Noan is now happening with Field too. Noan is taking his side as there isn't any clear evidence, and he says directly that he has been in Field's shoes. They took him in as he helped Field. Despite saying that Field is different from his dad, they still distance themselves from him. The parallels here are good, giving Noan now a different lens to go through a similar scenario. Field and Noan talk about how they are going to visit a place full of fireflies when they can go out in the summer. They have a very good and long talk. I love when characters talk about their feelings like this. Field compares his life to a rotting grass, and that's where the quote from the beginning comes from. He also talks about how Noan's help encouraged him to help others as well, and that this would create a ripple effect, where the one he helps would in turn help someone else. Field notes how no one is stronger than him, where even though they went through a similar scenario, a similar experience, Noan's grip on reality is much stronger. Okay, one thing I have to mention here is how beautiful some of the prose of PGR can be. Reading this made me ascend. But I digress. At one point, Field asks Noan about what he wants to do in the future, which Noan, for some reason, cannot remember. I think this is interesting as he could also not remember specifically his name when he woke up. This is probably even more repressed inside him. Does he hate that part of him too? Does he regret what he says here? We'll see how they handle this later on. So they end off this interaction with Noan giving Field a nickname, Summer. Honestly, this was a good conversation, and I wish they had more like this with Rachel and the other cargo crew members as well, not only to develop their own personalities but also to add to Noan's, just as how this one did. After a few months of them just casually spending their days like this, it seems that the animosity towards Bancroft has no indication of stopping anytime soon. This prompts Noan to tell Field that he will help his dad when his training finishes in 2 months, which Field just outright rejects, blaming himself for his illness. And that was the last time Noan ever saw Field. The only thing he found next time was a firefly toy and a note. The prose in this note again is beautiful. There's a lot of interpretations you can take from this note. I'm not really quite sure how the writers want me to interpret this. So let's talk about him for a moment now. I don't like his character. He evidently is just a tool for Noan's character to have another layer. But I just don't like how they made him have the most bland personality and the most obvious archetype. But the bigger issue here is how they formulate Field's relationship with his father. Conceptually, there's a complex dynamic between them where one party is snitching for the other, thus inviting animosity, while the other party blames themselves for being the one that instigated this. But they barely address this in a grounded manner where I would gain any semblance of care about this supposed complex dynamic. Does he serve his purpose for being a tool for Noan? Yes. Does he do it well? Not really. If they really wanted to make me care about what the loss of Field meant to Noan, I would have liked it to be built from both sides. But for me, it just felt like a one-sided thing from Noan. That is what I got from this note. That he only is thinking about himself. That he has to do his own stuff, submerged in darkness. The only thing he'd like is if Noan never forgets him. Well, isn't that selfish? He never even addressed his relationship with Noan and how he would miss him or whatever, anything like that. And this feeling will come again later as well. This is where I felt like they fumbled by adding too many things. I'd rather they just develop his affiliation with the cargo crew captains rather than Field, or do it in a way that would also make me care about what Field thinks about the loss of Noan. Leaving just like that without a word makes it kind of feel like he does not care about Noan at all, which is not really what is told. I don't know, there aren't really anything else to be talked about regarding Field's character, but this plays into something larger for the narrative. See, I love slice of life, and the characters just talking about their day-to-day problems. But the issue with Field being mishandled is that the game thinks I'm supposed to care about him beyond his association with Noan, akin to how I feel for Julie. And I don't think they have done enough to make me care. This results in this entire segment feeling quite monotonous. I'm a sucker for insanely long stories building multiple characters and the plot with multiple perspectives, but this just seems padding for the sake of padding, for the sake of adding another point of view that isn't explored as well as it could have, which ultimately leads to the degradation of pacing quite a bit. This was the only part where I was bored by the plot itself. I just wanted it to continue, and I could not live in the moment with the characters as I have previously done. Not just this one, but the next few ones altogether. Anyways, no one goes around looking for Field after this. As he's shouting his name at the dead of night, a couple of people wake up and continue to ridicule Bancroft and his son, saying that they had it coming to them. Noan, being angered by this, argues that blaming and singling out individuals as bad apples isn't solving the problem. You know, like how it was established previously that people tend to point fingers at the person in front of them when in a desperate situation. He believes that more people like Bancroft will emerge because individuals are always willing to trade information for personal gain because of the system they have in place. But if there are so many people who do this, and the rest keep singling them out, the aristocrats would just change the commoner carriage to the paper quota system as well, which would then result in them not paying even a single person should one snitch them, ultimately only benefiting the aristocrats. And yeah, this is very interesting, and no one points out that they are just twisting their own fates against them doing this. The characters reaching the same conclusion as the players are a sign of meticulous attention to detail. You know, how in a good mystery story, there are always enough clues for the reader as well. It's similar to that and should be applauded. Shauna backs up Noan, agreeing with him. She goes completely apeshit mode and names all of the people who've been doing fucked up shit as well. Bancroft has just been capitalizing that exact thing. They only hate Bancroft because they need a scapegoat, as they willingly let Bancroft still manage the cargo that he loses a part of the mission every single time, just to hide their own crimes. So they actually directly mention Bancroft snitching for the first time here, which I think should have been clearly stated before. Like, they do hint to it, but this is something that I don't really think should be hinted towards, but rather directly said. This ultimately led some people to aid in helping them search for Field, though a lot of people still didn't and just shut their mouth. No one thinks that this might have been a small dent in erasing the internal conflicts among them. I think this part was interestingly done, and it showcased a lot of different points of view and paints a lot of richness to the member of the lower levels and how they operate. Even among the ones who are officially united, they are only united by name and they have their own agendas too. There's also the theme of the impact of individual choices on a collective scale. Not only related to the paper quota system where one's liability could cause the suffering for all, but also consider the specific reason why no one brings this system up instead of his own ostracization. Because this is what bothers him. Why does it bother him? Because this exact same thing happened with him. It shows that he has gained a sense of maturity to understand the consequence of that. But yeah, the conclusion they reached was Fields somehow managed to hide past all the security cameras and made his way into a cargo, his dad's cargo, and then was either left behind due to him plotting with Bancroft for stealing or got lost. Assad was the one who suggested this. I haven't really talked about him, but he's not that important a character currently. He's somewhat brashed and is married to the head chef of the lower levels, Barbara, who took the position of Noan's mom after she died. Bancroft was visibly shocked that Field was missing when he returned from his cargo crew mission. Assad continues to accuse Bancroft that he probably left his son there to steal, which Bancroft also refuses that he didn't lose any cargo this time. The animosity is at its peak. Something to note here though is that Bancroft keeps his stuff in G54. Somehow Field found it out. Bancroft never told Field where he keeps his cargo, so he was confused. Anyways, later on he leaves the train to look for his son. No one offers to help, but Bancroft refuses him. Time passes by. Noan kept that firefly toy as a keepsake between them. He's been growing older. He passed Rachel's test and is a fully fledged cargo crew member who can go out for missions now. Their promise of watching the fireflies together is witnessed just by Noan. He's been looking for them, Field and Bancroft, for years. So Noan wakes up then, realizing that after remembering his name, he went into a small coma. He talks with Lithos a bit and then sees the other constructs talking, or rather, arguing about the pros and cons of being an ascendant. They talk about things like fear, having confidence in themselves, which are refuted by saying that that's just blind optimism. All of these are reasonable talks anyone would have during a desperate scenario. I've done debates before and the patterns are quite similar, but I would not call it particularly engaging right now. As I said, the Field intermission kind of killed the pacing, but it's believable at least. No one feels a burning pain at a dude punching Talbot because of his insistence of being an ascendant. This seems to remind him of his own estrangement, labeling him as the bad guy. He also remembers that he was saved by an ascendant as well. They cut to another scene here with some ascendants talking. This is not a flashback but just a separate scene. There's some lore about how the ascendant agent, Von Nugget, operates here. Explaining this wouldn't really contribute to the critique, but it's just exposition. It does leave a bad taste in my mouth that the ascendant lore is being explored like this. Anyways, so Lithos is an ascendant. Lithos was the one who made Noan into a construct because he was intrigued by Noan's past. He has the ability to tamper with people's memories. It is said that Lithos has a history of being an anomaly, even among the ascendants. He has this twisted perception of the red tide. He wants to exist through the red tide. I will explain this more when it becomes relevant. The world of red tide is perfect for Lithos, and warns Noan that he will lose control and perish due to the punishing if he rejects Lithos, thus hurting others. Noan still rejects, saying that living in the red tides through shards of memories isn't what one would consider living. There's also interesting tidbits about Lithos' character here, that he says, "I'm sorry, forgive me." I am intrigued by this state of mind because he genuinely believes that this is the moral thing to do, and he is quite polite about it. He says forget all of this and that they'll start again. This specific phrasing of starting again was interesting. I feel like this makes Lithos quite human, and it's just a consequence of her experience that she'd naturally act like this. I hope they build more on this at some point. Anyway, so back to the present, Noan realizes that the one who is attracting the ascendants and the corrupted to this place might not be Talbot but Noan himself. So they go out to fight as hordes of corrupted come near them. Now I want to highlight something I found very interesting. You see this torn up newspaper in the ground. It contains rumors about salt being a treatment to the punishing virus. This single thing, I feel like, adds so much richness and believability to the world. Not only does the newspaper paint a vivid picture of how the scenario was, but even looking at how the sentences are formulated, you can understand that this was written in the early stages of the pandemic. Back then, price inflation was something to be considered. People falling victim to scams was something to be considered. And the sole fact that it was a newspaper outside a medical center means that back then there were enough means to not only print, but to distribute it to the people, and that people would even read it too. Since there are 3 different papers here, all of these lead to a reasonable picture of how the infancy of the virus looked. Think of the COVID pandemic we faced. There were tons and tons of rumors throughout, but they peaked in the beginning, right? Miracle hacks. This one single thing is so cool. Couple this with how Kuro handles their culture, and man, it makes me think how perfect the video game genre is for world building. This is the stuff you can only do in games, where you can explore at your own pace, just seeing it lying on the ground. So yeah, as they were fighting, the other constructs were getting brutally infected with the punishing, but seeing as no one was mostly immune to it, they started doubting him even more. The battle keeps raging on for hours. The concentration has gone from bad to worse. The red tide has been oozing out of the road, limiting where they can run and hide. They momentarily go back inside the center to regroup, and they start to gang up on Talbot for thinking that he lured in the Ascendants here. Noan then admits to be the actual person who the Ascendants are after. There's a fun conversation here where Noan and Talbot address that what's going on to them is like a plot of a manga, with Noan being the amnesiac. It's short-lived, and I wish conversations like this to break up the seriousness of the situation was more frequent, but it is what it is. Even though Noan admitted to being the one connected to the Ascendants, most of the brutality is being targeted towards Talbot, as he's being very obtuse about it. Notice how this parallels to the scene just before, where they know the main source of their problems, but they still go for the throats of who's in front of them, causing internal conflicts. I'm glad no one remembers this while seeing these scenes unfold, a very good parallel to what's been going on. Except back then no one was a kid. He is not powerless as he once was, in the most literal sense. So he decides to make use of his powers, saying that he will go out to get recruitments. After a while, they only let Noan leave, while keeping Talbot, Lillian, and Lithos. Let me briefly explain the red tide now. You can say that it is a parasitic liquid born from the virus. It devours objects, humans, and machines to grow in size and birth different creatures. Basically, like people believe creatures are born from the sea in the real world, it is quite similar to that, and the hetero creatures are born from the red tide. The unique feature of the red tide is, however, is that it can be likened to an entire parasite itself, as it retains the memories of people it devours, and it can use those memories, projecting them as shards, as bait to lure in even more people. Think of how suddenly seeing your dead pet in the middle of the ocean after their death, wouldn't you instinctively think of going towards it to save it? It's sort of like that. So some ominous projections of the red tide tells Noan that he should have accepted the proposal, that he should have embraced the proposal, and a reminder for the missed opportunities in order to achieve a bit better circumstances. Noan is still quite not sure about what the projections are implying, as they are referring to him as Shrek, and then suddenly he hears footsteps. Kuro blesses us with the power to walk for the first time in PGR, truly a mind-blowing innovation, but in all honesty I know their hands are tied when it comes to budget and everything, especially considering when this chapter was released, but this was a nice addition. Anyways, the projections seem to be against Shrek, saying that he could have saved them, that Shrek was chosen, but he ran away from his responsibilities. Noan asks the projections who they are. Then a flashback happens, or rather a projection, that she was a task force defect who went through the Ascendant screening during the same time as Noan. When that defect fails, Lithos parallels it to the filtering in ACA, or Asslam. Lithos then tells Noan his interpretation of the red tide, that they have a place to go to should they fail the filtering and not suffer anymore, and to be born anew. He wants to save people just as much as everyone, but he believes that being in the red tide is the ultimate freedom, as that will dissolve all of your pain, and you will live through shards of emotion with not only your loved ones, but also all of humanity. This conversation gives us a clearer idea of Lithos' mindset. Noan was her first successful experiment to make a construct, but she will never force Noan to join the Ascendants. She will try and try again, trying to make him believe in Lithos' way, wiping his memories and letting him come to the conclusion on his own. So yeah, this implies that he was the one who wiped Noan's memories multiple times, but what's more fascinating is that he says that he will only guide him. It's quite difficult to express it in words, but there's a sense of a little girl, kind of perplexed, but still determined to do what she seems right. They really nail that feeling of Lithos unequivocally believing that the world of Red Tide is humanity's only path forward. There's not a shred of irony in his tone that he doesn't want to hurt anyone. That's why him urging Noan to try out his new powers feels more than just a bait for an irresistible offer, like how you want your friends to try out a game or an anime earnestly and hoping they like it just as much as you do. Obviously, there are holes with what he believes, but they also make a really solid case, not just through a backstory, but also how they act. So far, Lithos is an interesting character. So that was the end of the field arc for now. This whole arc was basically the lull in the entire chapter. They introduced the new system of rewards and gave a case with how it played with Bancroft, which I like the idea of, but without any substance between them, I think it gets monotonous to the point of ruining the pacing. Sometimes it's just regurgitating the previous information without providing anything new. I'm not saying there needed to be some hype stuff, but more things to vary up the ideas they were trying to say, like some unserious talks between Noan and Lillian, or the Ascendants maybe. As it is, the Ascendants' intermission during the middle seemed like mindless exposition of information overload. I get that stuff like this is needed in a gacha format to further the grander narrative, but that does not make it any good. I'd rather they address this directly in the center of the plot with a flashback between the characters having a conversation, rather than just info dumps scattered throughout. So yeah, it could have been a lot better, but it gets the job done. Now we will go into the Lithos and Rachel arc. So in the next episode of the Red Tide projections fucking up Noan, we go back to when he was 17. It was winter when he first met Bella, starting off with an immediate contrast to Field, who represented this summer in Noan's life. Basically, the cargo crew has been dealing weapons with Bella and her grandfather. Bella refuses when asked to join the cargo crew, saying that they'll be in a precarious situation should they join. Bella sort of teases him, but ultimately it's a short interaction. Rachel has been keeping the weapons among the unsold blessing boxes. They have procured enough for the revolt, now they are just waiting for the right time. They bring up an interesting contrast. Those blessing boxes were initially the thing that ignited the huge conflicts in the lower levels devised by the upper classes, but now they are using the same thing to solidify their revolt. A scruffle goes down here as a result of the paper quota system, and a dude died after voicing their complaint against the guards. So what happened was, the CPF that purifies the area of the virus was malfunctioning. So one of the engineers informed the guards they were drunk and then they couldn't really process what was going on, and by the time they actually came to check up on what was going on, a few people were already infected, making them not being able to finish the insane workload. Using medication to treat their suffering is also a no-go, as it would be seen as unauthorized use of valuable resources and could result in the complaints to the higher authorities. So because of this, the workers got into a fight with the guards. The one person that died though was Ed, the one who helped Noan find Julie so long ago. Learning this leaves Noan in a state of stagnant lifelessness. A while after, 3 more guards die, just a product of this hellhole. No clear intention, they just happen to be the victims. They are in a predicament, thinking how they are going to explain it. Noan thinks of a plan to tell them how they can explain the circumstances that would make it seem like it's unconnected to the blessing boxes. Bella chips in to say that she will testify this too. I made a note here that the way Noan's handling all of these seems like he has been bottling up a lot of stress, and the game read me like a book, because in the very next scene, Bella herself notices this and tells Noan that he seems like he will break down any moment, though Noan says after a brief pause that he's fine. I love this small interaction. When Bella asks if exhaustion is all Noan is facing and then points out Ed's death, Noan does not say anything. Notice how he always goes silent when he is thinking something more but can't say? It's in full display here where he says how could that be all? It can't ever be everything there is to it. He struggles with the idea of becoming desensitized to it. As he contemplates their plans and their impending revolt, he keeps his emotion tightly sealed, internalizing the lessons Rachel has imparted onto him. Really good how Bella herself realizes how that could have been insensitive to say, considering she knows nothing about Noan's life. How could she make a comment like that, thus saying, never mind, and that it was enough impressive and functioning at all due to how taxing it is. Even Bella asks how Rachel has managed to find so many things to trade. Bella probes some interesting questions. She asks Noan's opinion of how likely it is that they will win, and even though Rachel does not tell them everything, how come he can be so sure and trusting? Noan affirms that he's okay with it, as Rachel has not divulged everything to lower the possibilities of snitching. Noan's replies gives us glimpses into how Noan views his life at the moment, just that they are nothing more than robots now, doing what they must do, thinking they are all equal, regardless of age. They listen to each other because they have to be united. It's not about being impressed of what one can do, but rather how they can achieve their goal as comrades. They have kind of a fun ending to the conversation. Anyways, he leaves putting on a fake smile, and he has been doing so very often. Back in the present, he then leaves the projection that was Bella's, as he knows he has some work to do. As Noan fights off the corrupted to save strangling constructs, he realizes he can control the corrupted, which makes the constructs think that he is an ascendant. As they try to attack Noan for this reason, the punishing protects him, as crimson spikes attack the constructs who are attacking Noan. He still cannot fully control them, so he himself comes in the way of the spikes to stop it. This makes him think that he's just making everything worse. He pleads the constructs to just stay back. Still, he reached a new construct base and asked to send reinforcement to the medical center where Talbot and the rest are. After some deliberation, they do send reinforcements, keeping an eye on Noan. The music was really unfitting here. Could have used a different OST to set as a backdrop here for Noan losing his shit. Anyway, so Noan contemplates his power. Lithos shows up suddenly. Apparently, she was worried that Noan has been out for so long. She also made it through the red tide, which was surprising to Noan, as he still doesn't remember that Lithos was the ascendant that helped him. Lithos shows Noan that she can control the punishing, and then it finally clicks for him that he was the ascendant all along. When Noan realizes that, the first thing he asks is what his pronouns are. I don't really know how I feel about this translation, but anyways, Lithos tries to entice Noan on his views on the red tide again. He reveals that this is the 4th time this has happened, that Lithos has replaced Noan's memories. I briefed out the conversation as it is just what happened in the past too, and I will talk more in depth about it later. But the point of interest is that Lithos still does not want to adopt any means of forcefulness, playing into the intrigue of his character. Another intriguing aspect of Noan's character here is his continued refusal of Lithos. However, it is not because he perceives Lithos' propositions as flawed, but rather he thinks that there must be a profound reason for his previous rejections, a reason he can't recall yet. Amidst all the suffering he's endured, this perspective highlights that Noan's development isn't solely shaped by his pain. There's something deeper at play, and he yearns to go there, to go deeper, to remember, to uncover what triggered this transformation. Notably, he speaks of avoiding reckless decisions, a stark contrast to his impulsive nature as a child when he rushed into safe field without considering the consequences. There had to have been something that prompted this change, and Noan wants to find that out. And guess what Lithos says to that? He says that it might be very tough for Noan, but Lithos can still be patient, and gives Noan back his memories. I find this dynamic very interesting to go through, for it is remarkably effortful in handling both Noan and Lithos, where their characters go beyond depression porn. The next note starts off with a flashback of Noan's losses in different times, every time leaving Noan alone in the freezing snow. One of them was the death of Rachel. This sets the foundation for a discussion of the broader themes of regret through the lens of Lithos and Rachel. In a way, Rachel and Lithos are mentor figures to Noan. Rachel was during his human years, and Lithos was during his time as a construct. Both of them shape how Noan deals with him losing so many of his loved ones and being the only one left alive at the end. Them having the same surface but different foundation provides Noan two different ideologies to consider. Do you lament having just one choice, or do you embrace it because it's your sole choice? I think they provide a solid case for both. This parallel was uncalled for, but very interesting. There are multiple instances where they cut to Lithos' attempts at recruiting Noan to parallel them. These cuts could have been a little better. I mean, yes, it does make sense after I finish the chapter, but looking back in hindsight, there are some parts that did not stick with me when I was initially reading it. Though it may have been just the side effect of the lull of the previous arc and my mind had to restart. This is one of the faults of when the pacing dies down. Your mind takes a bit to recuperate. They tell you more about how complicated Lithos' feelings are, that he was abused at an orphanage, being left there due to his disability. His legs are paralyzed. I find it compelling that he says the virus freed him from that orphanage, but also took away his loved ones, just as how he was both betrayed and aided by humans. So his perception on life stems from both of these. Born in the form of something beyond simple love or hate, he wants to be with his loved ones, but he has been betrayed too many times, so the best outcome he could reach is living with them through the red tide, and he wholeheartedly is devoted to achieving this outcome. They parallel this with Rachel as well, saying that she has been like a fish in two ponds, working with the aristocrats, making a deal with the Ashlar specifically to secure supplies and unite the lower levels for a revolt. Like she wants to help the lower level, but not only did she take the help of who she's telling the lower levels that their enemy is, but Rachel was also taking their own pay and resources from the tampering Julie, and now Barbara did. This created a disparity and conflict between the people in their lower levels. Rachel herself distrusts so many of the people she works with, including Barbara, but she still is working with them as they might be useful for their connections. She wanted to end the turmoil, but working with the upper levels was the best option she had. What is contrasting them here is that Rachel is left with a cesspool of regret, that she is only left with one option, whereas Lithos is embracing this one option. Thus Lithos asks Noan to consider the downfall of the cargo crew precisely due to this belief, as after Rachel tells Noan her history with Julie and how they become close and all, she tells Noan that he should not make the same mistakes as she made. When Noan tells her that Julie said the same thing, Rachel realizes that Julie was regretting their decisions too. The way she deals with it self-depreciatingly aligns with her uneasiness before the night of the revolt. Because she is obviously thinking is whether or not this was worth it to begin with, akin to how Julie dealt with her regret. Rachel passes out while being a bit drunk later, and then they find out that Assad's jacket was apparently bugged, and their entire conversation about the revolt being hours away leaked. Noan snaps at Assad, unsurprisingly, as Assad just casually jokes away, saying that this was his wife keeping tabs on him. Well, it wasn't, and that was the prelude to the revolt. Last thing I want to mention about this note is this. I like that they mentioned this, going full circle back to when the cargo crew was a revered position. So the revolt started slightly differently than planned. The guards learned of the revolt and started attacking before the revolt started. Assad was brutally murdered. Rachel and the other guards have a back and forth where they tell Rachel not to escalate things, but Rachel says that things have escalated too much already, signaling that there's no holding back. There's some fighting and it is all written in quite an engaging manner. I was entertained while reading it, and the music backing it up was really good. The revolt starts with them taking the upper hand due to their knowledge of the train, but that novelty slowly wears out as superior weaponry of the guards are just way too strong. By the next morning, about 50 people remain in the cargo crew. They are hard pressed to go to the upper levels, and only Rachel and a few others with her made it. Anyway, so suddenly there's a huge riot that forces Noan's group to fall back. Also, the guards are using the top of the train to go back and take the children and elderly as hostages, which was very interesting way to use the actual setting, the train. I read it like this. To stop them, they call the lower level to come to the middle as they blow up the train, splitting it in two. The aristocrats plan on stopping the train because there's too much resources lost. So as the lower level people think about disembarking, they see a helicopter attacking them. With Noan, there was only the cargo crew captains Nino and Shauna, and another Bumblebee member. To give them an opportunity to escape, Shauna embarks on a suicide mission. She also makes an empty promise to Nino, saying yes to go through with their marriage after all this is over. I liked how this was done, added to the atrocity of the moment. Anyways, Shauna dies. They are given a moment to escape, but Nino wants to get Shauna's body back. During the process, he was also badly wounded though. After a lot of tribulations, Noan only managed to get Nino back in that state. All of them are in very deep distress, as this is not at all how they imagined the revolt would go after years and years of planning. Nino slowly loses his consciousness in Noan's hand with the thought of the revolt failing and Shauna sacrificing. This line stuck with Noan. They have the people who can't fight as the hostages now, ordering the rioters to come out of hiding. The only option they find now is to fake surrender, and then Noan sees Anthill as one of the ones captured there, emotionally breaking down. Noan thinks back to how he was told by his mother and Rachel, just because people were silent does not mean that they approved of the suffering. He thinks how Hill has been contributing in her own way, taking care of the people in the lower levels. Hill confirms that Barbara poisoned Julie's food. She knew but could not tell. She just stood there, being powerless, hating herself for being powerless. But just then, Hill is seen holding a grenade and then blowing herself up. Fuck, this was brutal. And it felt hard to swallow, brilliantly directed. This scene is succeeded by a remarkable character moment for Noan. He believed he comprehended Rachel's words about not everyone having what it takes to stand up to the bad guys. But this was not what he thought. I love this quote. The young matures as they grow. The old change as they mature. Even the dying cinder contains the courage to ignite itself and burn. This gives Noan an entirely new perspective on helping people, and how people mentally are driven to the corner to make a choice. He didn't realize that this powerless can bottle up. Their own powerlessness can eat them up like nothing else. And when it goes to a boiling point, well, it erupts. Circumstances, along with the feeling of powerlessness, can drive people to the extremes, adding another layer to just how complex the human soul can be, and so many factors leading people to make their ultimate decision. But now, Hill is left without even the choice to regret. I love this. So after a while, Noan leaves the injured behind and goes to find Rachel. He meets her on the top of the train in the upper level. Rachel is badly wounded with blood dripping from her forehead. She's completely lost her left hand. Rachel exclaims that they've lost. Turns out they had more riots hidden. There was also some conflict among the upper levels. This is where another layer of the complexity of Asslam is given. The upper level is mainly divided into two parts, the aristocrats and the royals, Ashlar and Jamila being a prominent figure of those groups respectively. Rachel says that there is some animosity towards Ashlar now, so he is in a predicament. The story then takes an interesting turn as Rachel asks Noan to kill her. I never expected this to go down like this, and I think it perfectly encapsulates just to what extreme a human soul can go for the search of comfort. Rachel tells Noan that if she takes Rachel's terminal that has the logs of everything she's done with Ashlar, and of course her head as well, he will use this opportunity to deem Noan as a hero who quelled the riot. Rachel is passing on the torch to Noan, a last-ditch effort to retain some power within the cargo crew. She's been conditioned to think that the only way they can survive is with the help of the upper levels. She says that they require time to rebuild strength for another revolt. However, Rachel's plan failed to consider the deep level of animosity Noan would face from the lower level inhabitants for taking her life, whereas she had been beloved. This complexity emerges alongside Rachel's inherent distrust of those in the lower tiers as she continues to rely on Ashlar, the sole escape route for her. Noan refuses as there's no way he can kill his mentor and that he will find medication. Rachel then gives her gun to Noan, tells him to kill her and live on, that she inadvertently killed Julie and she wants to atone for that. The way she's going to do it is making sure he lives on, carrying their dreams. The most heartbreaking thing though, she tells Noan to consider killing her, her last wish. As she says this, she puts her shivering hand on top of Noan's, and as Noan is about to hold her hand with the other, she uses that hand to pull the trigger with Noan's. Fuck, this got me. I thoroughly enjoyed that throughout the entirety of this segment. With Rachel, her regret of her deeds came into every aspect of her decisions. Imagine leading a whole group for years, fucking them up behind their backs and working with the enemy, and then not even achieving what you set out to achieve, along with getting so much guilt. In the previous scene, she herself was urging more towards all of this being a mistake, and now that all of it had passed in what could have possibly been the worst possible outcome, how can she show her face to the lower levels? Thus, how can she even live with herself? And in a desperate attempt to relieve herself from all of this regret, she literally, without even considering anything Noan says, just tries to find some sort of salvation. It's so good, because obviously it would be Noan, as it was his parents along with Rachel that instigated all of this, and as a result, Noan had to suffer the brunt of everything. So her attempt at finding this solace, just to rid of all of this regret, came from killing herself through Noan, paralleling how Julie sought validation from Noan. Yeah, so really well done scene with mixing a lot of different layers. Definitely one of the highlights. After Rachel dies, Noan is taken to the same cell as his mom. There is Chang Yu with him here. Apparently Jamila sent him to apologize on her behalf, and Jamila is aware that Noan has the terminal somehow. The following day, Noan is taken to a trial. Constructs from Babylonia also arrive as guests. It is officially thought that the Kuro crew and Bumblebee's work is imperative, so everyone has a seat here. Ashlar has been hard pressing Noan to give up the terminal, which again has a lot of secrets of Ashlar. So yeah, basically the same thing that Rachel said will be happening, where Noan will be crowned the hero who quelled the riot. The contrast, Rachel was loved, but Noan hated. The trial here is actually quite interesting and fun to follow the back and forth of, as they do well to keep the same level of intricacy in the lower levels, but since it would require me to introduce characters from older chapters and concepts as well, I've decided to omit it from the discussion and only address the key points that has further character implications. Firstly, the one who wired Assad was actually Barbara, her wife, and later gave that info to the guards. Kind of insane that she backstabbed the entire lower levels basically. Noan, however, is in the biggest predicament right now. He thinks whether or not she would work with Ashlar again. He tries to follow Rachel's footsteps. He thinks, what would Rachel do? He thinks whether or not she would work with Ashlar again, should she turn back time. He concludes that she probably would, confirming what I said about what Rachel thought about power. Rachel did not see any other ways and did whatever she could with that higher power to secure weapons, to the point where she was even distrustful of some of the cargo crew members. And this is why I think Rachel's whole shtick works way better than feels. As it has a long-lasting consequence on what Noan actively feels. She was his mentor, and she, after going through so many trials and tribulations, decided to rely on the higher power from another side. That was her choice. And does he have a choice now? Should he refuse Ashlar? In a moment of sudden recollection, Noan's mind races back to a time when Field had asked a simple question. What do you aspire to become in the future? It is as though the answer lies right here, right now. With unwavering determination, he realizes that this is the moment he's been waiting for, the time to fulfill his unspoken mission that the cargo crew had embarked upon years ago. That if he showcases all of the misdeeds of Ashlar, that they will finally get the leverage for the path for a better future. In his heart, he comprehends that he might not even live long enough to witness that. Nevertheless, Noan musters his courage and turns his gaze towards Ashlar, knowing that the key to their success lies in swaying the entire upper class to stand against him. But ultimately the tides turn against Noan as Ashlar deftly twists the narrative. He announces that Noan killed Rachel, the reason being Rachel killed his father. Thus, the thirst for revenge consumed him. See how this goes back to a previous conflict as well? Predictably, the lower levels turn against him, showcasing the immense influence one wields when they possess the authority. Cornered and in a moment of panic, Noan tries to entrust the terminal, the last hope for the cargo crew, to Changyu. Just at that moment, bullets pierce the air, hitting Noan, making him unconscious. The terminal shatters, as if mirroring the cargo crew's broken dreams. Ashlar then orders the guards to throw Noan off the train. So this paints a broader picture here, that the choice of justice and righteousness isn't that simple. See, Noan rejects what Rachel told him, to side with Ashlar. All of them are still behind Ashlar, even though Noan told the truth and is doing the righteous thing. He then considers, was Rachel right? Are they doing this because of the absolute power Ashlar holds? But Rachel said that Ashlar lost some of his power due to the conflicts. Noan regrets his choice, a futile attempt. He was naive to think that this terminal held absolute power, that evidence alone would have been enough to achieve the dreams of the cargo crew. His absolute power is now absolutely useless. And this line was the kicker. Their sacrifices are all in vain because of your choice. It was this absolute failure now that the cargo crew has no ground to stand on. They even lost what little Rachel left them, as they are now seen as a group of peasants that can do nothing but fight among themselves. They have lost their aid from the aristocrats. He has lost trust from these very peasants that were his comrades. They can't revolt anymore. Regret swells within him, tormenting his soul. Noan had believed he was on the righteous path, that his choice was just. But as his thoughts now question the outcome, he wonders if this is the reality he had envisioned. This scene is the pinnacle of his inner turmoil. It serves as a poignant reminder that even the most seasoned individuals can carry a veil of naivety. They may progress 2 steps forward, but inevitably take 1 step back. The shattering of one's belief can have a profound impact on their mental state. Noan had, after numerous trials, thought he knew what righteous was. He thought he could be the righteous hero he dreamed of, so he enacted upon it. However, in doing so, he watched the dreams of tens of thousands of people vanish like a dying cinder. His world crumbled and his convictions shattered. He began to believe that he had committed an unforgivable sin, an irreversible mistake, that perhaps he should have listened to Rachel's orders, acknowledging that power might after all be absolute. Now think about what Rachel was proposing to him. Doesn't it make sense that he would take the power then, if he faced such a deep fall? But he still does not. Why is that? And this is precisely where the complexity of his character lies. This chapter really does a brilliant job in highlighting this aspect of Noan through both Rachel and Lithos. That was pretty much the end of Lithos and Rachel's arc, both playing a pivotal role in how Noan's mentality shapes. Now, the final arc of this chapter, the Noan's arc. So we are back to the beginning. Noan is thrown off the train. Field's Firefly toy blocked the shot, somewhat lessening the lethality. Is this plot armor? Yes. I wish the explanation was a bit better. But whatever. So he is not dead. But that actually makes it worse. Noan's mind is in complete chaos with the realization that everyone he cares about has perished, and that it was completely his own choice that made the fall into abyss that much worse. Now that Noan remembers that there is a very good reason for why Lithos is asking him to join, Lithos tells him to go back to the medical center. Apparently, the corrupted have arrived earlier than the support Noan called. All of the injured and infected in their dying breath deem Noan and Talbot the ones responsible for attracting the ascendants, heralding their plight. Just adding on to Noan's regret even more. Suddenly, even the powers he was using to control the corrupted stopped working. Then Talbot himself became infected. Noan, not left with any other options, has to kill him now. Noan is distraught at looking at all the dead, a repeat of what happened many times now, that Noan was the sole survivor, where everyone else was dead, as if Noan himself was the harbinger of death. Even though he contemplates checking on Lillian's team, he ultimately decides against it, thinking he will just bring in more disaster. Field's words echo what he wanted to be in the future, huh? He didn't remember it before, but now it resurfaced with painstakingly remarkable clarity that he wanted to make manga, or rather, a down-to-earth working person, and he wanted to be a righteous and reliable doctor, just like his mother said, and stop causing trouble for others. And most importantly, he wanted to change this world full of hopelessness. He did not want to let Mom and Rachel down. Noan could not remember it previously. Why? Now this was insane. I clapped my feet when I saw this because it embraces the key themes of this chapter so vehemently. Regret. Noan could not remember this because he concluded that he can't do this. He does not believe in himself that he is capable of doing this. This whole monologue laid bare his insecurities, his naivety, adding so much humanity to his character. A single wrong choice that repeatedly hurt people sends his reality down a spiral of regret, recalling how Field's words echoed in his mind as he defied Rachel during the trial. It was precisely because of this. It's a remarkable way to provide a base for what one's subconscious thinks. He doubts himself. He blames himself. He even asks the one granting him the power, as he is the only one left for Noan to even ask. He constantly thinks of how Rachel had to give in to the power to bring about a change, but he is refusing that power. Is that really the correct decision? During the trial, this is also reflected in the outcome as well, where it did not matter if he had the correct evidence against Ashlar. Ultimately, what he says comes back in full circle, that ordinary people fall in the wrong line of justice just because they don't have any other means. Suddenly, a gunshot races past him, followed by the shooter saying, "This is his last warning." Noan, just like Rachel, seems to have given up. He says that if that was the last warning, then please don't miss the next one. He is completely done with everything. What is more chilling is that Noan's sprite is continuously smiling. This scene is excellently done, showcasing the lowest point in Noan's mind. What more could he possibly even want or ask for? Noan is confused that the commandant doesn't shoot, as it would be logical to pin him as the culprit of the massacre of the medical center, since he was the sole survivor. Commandant recognizes him though from the beginning and asks about the full story of what happened at the medical center, to which Noan is visibly surprised that he was asked this, saying how come he thinks that no one will speak the truth. I am pointing out exactly what they say here, as I want to highlight the nuances in what they say. Noan's little apprehension and question goes in line with his current chaotic mind, where he thinks that he is completely worthless, to the point of being afraid to live being afraid to make a decision. The commandant says that he wants to confirm the facts before doing anything, and that there was a rescue request. He asks Noan if that was from him. Noan, still with a smile, showing his disconnectedness to reality, just starts recalling all of the events and most of his journey to the commandant. The commandant says that what he did was not voluntary, but Noan just says, "So what? That does not mean he should be forgiven." Commandant then gives him a choice to stop going to the Ascendant and to go to Babylonia to be fixed up. What Noan says next is both insanely peak and morbidly sad to see. Now you get a clear, definitive picture of how terrified Noan is, not only of the outcome of his choices, but the very idea of making choices altogether. He asks Commandant that if he goes to Babylonia and the researchers fail to do anything, thus him losing the very chance to ever control power, and along with it, the ability to help others, is it still going to be a correct choice if he then gives up the power to help people simply because of what he considers righteous? And that last bit says more than what 1,000 words could ever say for what he considers righteous. From this, you can immediately connect it back to what he did at the trial. He did the righteous thing that he considered, fucked everyone up. Same case here. He's considering the righteous thing to go out and find resources and help, came back with everyone dead. Can you see how this is very similar all the way back with his mom when, at the brink of her death, at her lowest point, he asked Noan for validation, just like how he is doing with the commandant. The consistency within the themes is remarkable. He weighs these two options, questioning if his righteousness even has the capacity to be correct, even if he loses the power. He asks for comfort because time and time again, this has come back to haunt him from Rachel. People want reassurance. They want to cling to their belief no matter the slightest hope. Noan thought he let go of it all, but ultimately, his initial choice of not joining the Ascendant to be righteous is still ablaze in his heart. The commandant affirms that it still is righteous, and that it would be a betrayal to those who lost their lives. This is a very, very good line to solidify Noan's regret and how much the idea of choosing weighs on him, how his experiences shaped him, talking about Hill and the others. And he has also considered what going to Babylonia might entail later on. After a bit of back and forth, the commandant manages to make Noan agree to return to Babylonia. I really like that he did not immediately return, obviously weighing in the possible power that he is losing out that he can use to help others. And their conversation ends with a very peak callback, where in the very beginning of the story, the commandant gives Noan a paper, and he writes a note in it that he'd hate to turn down the commandant's invitation. Now, while this scene was really good, I have to mention something. The global version is bugged. There is supposed to be a live 2D here that plays during this scene, but in the global version, it still is not fixed. And it's been more than 2 weeks when I'm writing this. It still hasn't been fixed. If you don't know, I'm not saying that it will lessen the impact of the scene, but it just enhances what could have been. This is the first live 2D in PGR's history, so it should also catch you by surprise because of this reason, making it a very memorable moment. And that's not the only time this will happen. I don't know why they did not check this. The global version is very poorly managed and leaves a very poor taste in my mouth. Back to the story, suddenly Lithos shows up, stabbing Noan from the back, saying he can't let Noan leave. A bit of a reveal here that Lithos was the one connected to the conspiracy with the old Grey Raven commandant, so Lucia knows Lithos. Anyways, Lucia says how he has changed his appearance and that how he has the power to obscure visual modules. After some more back and forth, Lithos takes Noan away. Noan then goes to Lithos' lair where his memories are erased, his soul torn and rebirthed, feeling the same pain again and again. All of this just to sway Noan to change his decision. We still don't know why Noan refuses every single time. In this intermission where his mind is completely torn to pieces, he has visions of his loved ones. The haunting regret, the pain of loss, everything piles up on him and flashes through his mind. This is painful. It seems like he's pleading for a back, someone's back, but he does not have anyone. Especially painful is this last line where he says that everyone is dead in his dreams and asks if it will get better when he wakes up to them. Man, that's just brutally sad. This is in the past, directly after he was thrown off of the train. Jamila wanted to aid him because the royals had some problems, which isn't really explained that well, but okay. I think at this point it is believable enough. So he's a fugitive staying at a medical center now. He thinks his dreams of dying is better than the immense regret he feels at letting decades of hard work go awash. He forcibly sleeps all day to escape this reality. I love this part where you really see him spiraling down into the deepest corners of regret because of what he thought was righteous, putting everyone in a perilous situation now. His dreams are a mess. He is desperately hoping for a reality that is not this. This also adds to the scene just prior of what he told the commandant, to emphasize his efforts to cope with this overwhelming feeling. He begins to wonder if there could be any silver linings in the absence of those he loved. There are so many webs in this labyrinthine mind, compounding these reflections of roads his morality blocked the paths of. Then another really cool thing about the world building here is that we see the aftermath of everything that happened. The official story was that it's a man-made disaster. They falsified different accounts. People try to reap as much benefits for themselves as they can. All of it is really cool and just adds another box to the already very compelling setting. This also has another effect of letting Noan know the more brutal effects of the lower level now. I love how almost every piece here is converging into this almost puzzle that even after being complete, somehow is still getting more pieces added to it. They made Noan the pot to cook so much while giving each ingredient its own beauty. It's spectacular. Even in the medical center, you see tinges of the brutality. He has to leave as, because of him, old people are running out of work as he, a young dude, has been doing odd jobs to stay here for the past year. Noan is very quiet now. He only says the bare minimum. Subtle character change, I like it. He tells the doctor that he will leave very soon, the very next day. When he leaves, he goes out to search for Field as that was what his phantoms told him. Field is the only unconfirmed loss in his life now. So he still clings to that very hope that his rationality prove him wrong. It's natural that he would want to cling to the only possible piece of hope left in his life. Anyways, so out on his search, he meets Bella. He barely says anything to her, a very big contrast to their bickering later. Well, earlier in release? Okay, let's get Bella clear first. Noan's stuff with Bella has been shown in a previous chapter, and I enjoyed it back then. But putting information from there for this critique would not feel right, both because it's not a part of the chapter itself and also because it's been so long, such a long break between that and now, that would make any reader lose the emotional attachment they initially had. I liked their chemistry back then a lot, and I will be pointing out parts where it is relevant though. Apparently the name Beat is not hers, as who was her grandfather was only lying about being her grandfather. Bella refuses to be called by that name and does not want to talk further about the story. Anyways, she is out to find her mother. They draw parallels to both their situations on how they forego their names. When Bella asks Noan what his name is, Noan just tells her to call him Shrek, and this is where it all comes in full circle. Why? Because he wants to hide the reality of his past. Does that seem familiar? Yes, this is the same thing his mother did, adopting it exactly how his mother told him to live, like Shrek, like the monster in the swamp. I love that they are both adhering to the same method of distancing themselves from reality. And this conversation also is a breath of fresh air. Their personalities bounce off of each other really well. This unlikely but at the same time perfect duo makes their way towards City 074, Noan to search for Field and Bella to search for her mother. Their banter gives me life. Noan draws a portrait of Bella's mom that she uses to ask around, and after a while of traveling together, tucking away their pasts and connecting within books where one of them loves manga and while the other does self-help books, They grow more accustomed to the presence of one another, though still they don't talk that often and never about deep things, both using each other as a vessel to hide their past and pain. No one is afraid of those horrid moments of his past. Just like his name, he wants to rid himself of his regret, and isn't this a very primal human nature? People grasp at any straws to make themselves feel better when they are at the depths of despair. And remember how he just slept all day a year ago at the medical center? He avoids sleep now because the sleep reminds him of that past. He is afraid of himself and his past. He sleeps now because in reality, he has a back to run away from everything and just put his back against. His biggest fear though, regret. God, that's so good. Him avoiding sleep makes Bella start to worry about him though. So before they reach City 074, as spring arrives, Bella finds news of people having seen her mother. Seems like she was a member of the Bumblebees during the last few years she lived. The world is so small. They found a group of the next generation of cargo crew members during their search. There is a long discussion among them that, once again, was something one cannot help but marvel. They talk about how they are only able to stand because of the corpses of the sacrifices they made during the revolt. Ashlar is being slowly dismantled of all of his power. Among the newer members of the cargo crew, there lingered a sense of skepticism about whether all those sacrifices were justified, especially considering that Ashlar's misdeeds and transgressions would likely have been exposed eventually. The older generation then severely rebukes them very harshly, declaring with resounding pride that the rioters are the heroes who tipped off the stone for their future, and that their actions should not be diminished. During all of this, Noan could not utter a single word. As Noan's theme softly plays in the background, it beautifully encapsulates the emotion of this moment. Amidst the melancholy, there's a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light in the encroaching darkness. Noan overwhelmed to the point of silence. His utter speechlessness says more than any words could. Just think about it. He went all of these years regretting his choice, thinking Asslam is knee deep in hell. Because of him, the cargo crew. Julie's dream tarnished. Because of him, Rachel's suicide went in vain. Because of him, and even in the hospital, he hears the official story that the cargo crew was made out to be villains because of him. His words from the trial resound most profoundly now. He thought it haunting that he might not live to witness the resurgence of his comrades, the lower level, his home, but he still was willing to forego himself if that meant the betterment of the lower levels. That train of thought completely shattered his grip on reality, but now he hears that they are actually fine. He hears that their efforts, his choice, while not perfect, while not ideal, did put them in a better position. This should completely distort and disorient his reality. Did his past few years of regret mean nothing then? But they did still suffer. There would be a whirlwind inside him, a hellfire of contradictions and opposing thoughts. Should he feel happy that the cargo crew are doing well, that Rachel and his mom's dream did come true? Or should he be heartbroken that he cannot be a part of that dream anymore, that he cannot be a part of them anymore? How could you describe this without anything but a total emptiness of words? In the very next scene, they follow this up with something unimaginably brilliant, going hand in hand with his current thoughts. When Bella boards Asslam to look for her mom, guess what Noan does? He does not go with her. He refuses to go inside, not knowing if he should, or rather, can he visit the cargo crew now? Will he break down seeing his home, his dreams in a better place, or will he get thrown off? Tinges of regret also surface within Bella, drawing striking parallels between their emotions. I'm glad they're covering this, that Bella is thinking that if she had joined the cargo crew way back when Rachel and Noan asked her, she would have found her mother sooner. Noan leaves her to look for her mother. He hopes she finds what she's looking for, and if she comes back, they would meet at a base. It's been 7 years since he last saw Field, and now he was on his way to confront. His irrational hope makes him think back to a conversation with Rachel about Field. He thinks he is losing his rationality, his grip on reality. That's such a profoundly human thing to do. Rachel's words acts as an anchor to resist all of these irrational delusions, and how Noan says this is very heart-wrenchingly peak. I love how self-aware he is that he is clinging onto something that's beyond the realm of possibility. Noan recalls a lot of his conversations with Shauna too, and how her and Rachel also kind of parallel each other. Noan thinks that Rachel always focused on the parts of a person that she could question, while Shauna always found the parts she could trust. Shauna explains to him that people are complex, not everyone's virtues align, not everyone's borders are the same. Noan admits himself that Shauna played a pivotal role in him coming to grip with reality. Those two left him with so much knowledge how to view the world. He wants to keep these feelings inside him and not let go of the past, something he learned from both Shauna and Rachel. Because that now took form in the current Noan. Rejecting himself would mean rejecting them. This is such insane characterization, man. But yeah, typos like this kind of take you out of the moment. But anyways, Noan admits that he has been fooling himself with the delusion of Field being alive. Noan, awash with lots of different emotion, crosses the hill to find an orchard. We see that Rachel herself was partly responsible for leaving Field behind, adding on to even more regret on her part when he confronted Noan. This entire segment weaves the scene of Field's disappearance and Noan's in the present, fighting his mind to embrace acceptance. This parallel in concept is really good, but in practice does not really deliver the torrent of horror from one side, Field's side. This goes back to what I said about Field being nothing more than a tool, but for Noan this is exceptional. Field died here 7 years ago. What follows this is pin drop silence. No music, just a man, alone in a barren land, seeing the scarf of his long-lost friend, Field, entangled in a branch of a tree. This marks the end of his delusions. He can no longer fool himself. Noan, in a state of irrational disbelief, just says that he has found the last remnant of his life at Asslam, his unfounded grasp on the shared dream, even in the midst of their trials and tribulations. He retells Field that Asslam is in a slightly better position. I'm almost about to drop a tear while doing the voiceover for this, what the hell, man. Noan smiles for the first time in a very long time, accepting this moment that he has completely lost everything, lost all of his attachment to his past, and thanks Field for what he had left Noan, which he repeats as to atone for his sins and sorrows. This was brilliantly executed. I didn't cry while reading this, but I was glued to my seat. The drop-dead silence is perfect. You don't need any additives, nor embellishments when it's just pure emotions. A character feeling real is ultimately an unspecific statement. In retrospect, this scene perfectly epitomizes that. It's a presence felt in its presence, an absence missed in its absence. Noan and Field, the latter's lackluster character is strikingly obvious and impossible to not notice when Noan is an inch away from being the most human character. This starking contrast makes Field even worse, and as a result, it strips the full potential of the scene. But the direction, the theming, it was stellar, and the peak does not stop there, as the next node starts immediately with this music. Bella returns to Noan saying her mother passed away. She left a notebook and her dreams of a better tomorrow in the train after the rebellion. Bella asks Noan how much of her dream became a reality. Crying. Noan also sobbing. Me also with tears in my eyes with them. They engage in a conversation centering around how hard it is to stand back up when people fall, tying in with what Noan's mother says back then. Then, in what became my favorite moment of this chapter, they talk about how they are aware that they don't communicate. Feelings, regrets, truths, all of it left unsaid to preserve this fragile comfort they have found in each other. Some things are better left the way they are. They are aware that they need to move on from their past. They need to move on from their regrets, and that it would probably make them feel better if they did. But they still don't. It's difficult, it's frightening. They've discovered a solace in each other amid profound regret, and the prospect of change even if it could bring about a different kind of comfort, terrifies them. What if the knowledge of each other's past fractures this very specific comfort they built, where they have an escape from all of their torment, all of their regret, all of their past? When misery is a part of your identity, then not being miserable means not being yourself. They are both built on the idea that they wanted to free themselves from their past, and it is only in each other that they can do that. Man, this is the good stuff. I love how even without mentioning the word fear, you can sense their fear, how they fear losing this level of comfort. Yeah, absolutely 10 out of 10 conversation. Reminiscing the past at the base moments, it is all coming together. Conflicting emotions giving him contradictory feelings of settlement and tinges of regret. Noan started telling his actual feelings to the red-tide projections of Bella. He regrets how he never told her thank you for being the back he needed. He regrets never sharing the story of the pair of blossoms adorning his book, plucked from the tree where Field's scarf was once hung. This moment tugs at the heart, as Bella had keenly observed this detailed as seen in Fake Ascension, noting how Noan's penchant for using petals as bookmarks. He wishes that maybe eventually they could have become real friends. This is so beautiful. With the music, it got me tearing up. Like these feelings, Noan is telling to the red tide projection, the very red tide projection that he opposed when he was talking with Lithos, saying how could they ever substitute a real human interaction, a real bond. He further tells Bella how he still wanted to contribute to this crisis, how Bella's mother's wish was within reach, how he was learning medical procedures as his mother wanted him to so long ago, weaving together all of these plot threads into Noan's character. This is truly beautiful, that he was right to not give Ashlar the terminal that day, that it was through her and all of his loved ones, and seeing the Grey Raven and the rest of humanity die defending people, aiding, supporting and being supported by him, did he realize that he would have betrayed his loved ones if he had compromised, and to betray them would have been a compromise he could not bear. So, finally, this was the reason why he so vehemently opposed joining Lithos. His repressed emotions are still there. That's why it resurfaced before, making him question all of his choices, his regrets. He still longs for those who lost, but he is taking pride in his decisions. He is looking toward a better future now, to honor his loved ones. But this is the real kicker. People don't immediately change. They take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. This narrative structure is perfect, because expecting one incident to completely erase his regret would be beyond unnatural. Change does not happen instantly when one sets their mind to it. This innate weakness, innate inability to crawl out of despair just because they only saw one glimmer, is profoundly human, profoundly soulful. We see this change when he takes 2 steps forward, like when he learns of the cargo crew doing better and says his final goodbyes to Field. He realizes that he must carry on those experiences forward, learning medical procedures and striving for a better future. But there's also a step back, as when his memories were wiped, what comes back to him first? His regret. Losing all of his memories brought back the emotions he had wrestled with for years, tormenting his soul and plunging him into a spiral of regret once again. This is composited again and again, even throughout this soliloquy. Still questioning his choice, he reminds himself that he has to be better. He may regret his actions time and time again, but he must be better for them, for his loved ones. This line, "I am loved and I love them." I was clapping my feet entirely. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I love how they intertwined the second part of his arc like this, that he was starting to better himself, but that's when he was thrown off of the train in Survivalusum and picked up by Lithos, which then put him 1 step backwards, 4 times, and every time it was these choices and these same regrets are what came back to him first. He continued questioning himself, almost giving in. He tries and falls back. He tries again and falls back again. But ultimately, what prevails is what his loved ones left him, leading him to where he is now. His loved ones giving him the strength to confront his past, to confront the roads he could have taken, and comes into his own. But this gameplay segment is really cool for PGR. You hear his breath. He goes on to fight different corrupted, and Lithos meanwhile is fighting the commandant and talking to Noan through his mind. This stage also looks cool. You can tell that they were experimenting with some things as it is not quite there yet. Wish they used a different music for this boss fight, but they did say that they had issues during the pandemic. Why they never changed it later, who knows. Nevertheless, Lithos delves into psychological tactics, questioning whether Noan will let him down by reminding him when he let Rachel down. I think this part is weak and they needed to have a full-on conversation, but after we beat the boss, we have this. Noan, deep in the pits of the abyss, the fireflies guiding him, turning into guiding lights, their words echoing Mom, Rachel, Nino, Shauna, Field, Bella. Noan is standing between the lines of his past and his future, the culmination of everything. One last time, Noan thinks that he will beat his past, not by running away from it, but taking all of it with him to forge on ahead. When everyone said goodbye to him, I cried.
シュレック、さようなら。元気でね。さようなら。ノアン、さようなら。絶対生き抜けよ。それじゃあな、ノアン。さようなら。さようなら、ノアン。さようなら。
And there we have it. There is nothing more to add to this. This is just a very, very well done conclusion to everything I have mentioned. His regret, his bonds. God, when he said Okasan.
母さん。その方向は出口なのか?
Fuck. No one managed to escape from the tower and went on to help the commandant. Lithos says that he actually wants to outlive the apocalypse with people and that he is just choosing a different form. I would really like to see this explored more. He is such an interesting character. There are also interesting ideas about the complexities within the Ascendants. Lithos tries to talk with Noan, still not forcing him for anything. Noan's response, in which he emphasizes his identity as an ordinary person, just striving to do better. His experiences of mistreatment and his connection with Bella all come together as a powerful and sincere moment. Slightly anime, but all of it feels very earned. Von Nugget then calls Lithos away, leaving Noan overwhelmed by the toll. Overwhelmed, he eventually faints, leading him to be taken to Babylonia. And then after a while, Noan is awake. And the live 2D is bugged here as well. Fuck man. All of the emotions kind of swiveled away when I first played this, as I did know that there was a live 2D here and the fix only came after the patch. So dumb. Anyways, the commandant and Noan have a talk. The commandant tells Noan to stay awake, asking if he's remembered everything. The commandant then asks him the same thing he asked the first time they met. His name. Noan called himself Shrek, to run away, to hide his past, wearing a mask just like his mother. It acted as a defense mechanism he devised to free himself from the torment of his past. Shrek represents the dream, while Noan is the scars and memories of his loved ones, Bella being the bridge. It's a name of a sinner, but it is also a reminder to not stray away from the path his soul has chosen, what he chose for them, and what he chose for their dreams. Considering all of this, if he has to choose a name to symbolize his resolution, it's Noan. The past made him what he was, a reminder to honor the ones who made him what he is. This was nice and a good send-off, but man, did the live 2D bug ruin quite a lot. And then Asimov says that there is a unique technology at work with Noan and that he is neither an ascendant nor a transcendent. They talk about how they are going to deal with him and devising a way to make him not lose control. He was assigned to Dark Ares with Palma as the captain, Simon as the commandant, and the other members being Lillian, the little girl. She does seem very sketchy. There's also some foreshadowing for Lee's specialized frame. After this, there's a fun interaction where Noan meets the commandant and Lee as he was going out to change coding. Rachel at one point jokingly told him to try out rainbow hair, and then he does. I don't entirely like the idea of them dismissing he is Shrek. This has happened multiple times as of now. The commandant and Lucia was doing the exact thing. I feel like this could have been a way to form a unique bond. Okay, never mind. Lee does recognize him as Shrek. It was the rainbow colored hair, of course. But yeah, this conversation made me have a big smile on my face. Wish there was more. They are addressing the main theme one last time as a finality of this chapter. The commandant asks if no one regrets coming to Babylonia. Yeah, the conversation is peak. He has noticed that he's still getting ostracized in Babylonia for being related to the Ascendants, just like how he was for being related to the aristocrats. Sometimes even his teammates won't talk to him. He has been interrogated and monitored for his entire time here. Noan, using all of what he has been through to affirm that, just like the commandant, he won't regret it, even if it does get hard, that just like the commandant, he won't regret and run away, because that would betray the wills of his loved ones, and he ends up thanking the commandant. This final excerpt converges the themes laid out by his mother and Field and enacted upon himself with the others. And that is the end of the main story. I would like to briefly address the affection story too, as I found it interesting displaying his life after the main story, as it compounds what I already said about good character writing. He automatically doesn't have it all figured out, and it is still taking some time for him to process what's going on in Babylonia. Like when the commandant asks about his drawing, he instinctively has this defense mechanism to hide and dismiss it, as if this need to hide his hobby from people has been instilled within him since he was a child, and that he has a hard time still going out of this habit. Stuff like this really makes him a compelling character to follow. I urge you to read this if you like Cinder Burns, and it is really wholesome, and I don't mean that purely for the affection stuff. This is just a grounded look at how human they made Noan, where it may take years, but intense emotional trauma can still linger as someone is trying to overcome it. I never think ratings can fully capture of what one thinks of a piece of fiction and the effect it can have on the reader. This very long ass video should be enough to tell you that my thoughts on this chapter cannot be explored through a numerical value alone. It's hardly as definitive as saying that it is just good, but still, among all of the good and the bad I've said about it, this is how I would categorize the rating as follows. Plot would be a 4, characterization a 4, world building a 5 out of 5 obviously. I still think that intricacy explored within Asslam is the most fascinating thing this chapter did. If it explored Field's character a little more, then I would have given a characterization at least a 4.5. Noan is an excellent character and undoubtedly the most developed one in PGR. I get that in the grander scheme of things, this is probably one of, if not the most insignificant chapter. But is that not what the plot of this chapter is preaching itself? That the most ordinary should not be dismissed, rather rejoiced, as it is the price for a soul to burn, and a soul does burn. This is the most soulful chapter in PGR. Among all of the world-ending plots, this has nothing extraordinary of that nature. It explores pure human emotions, regret of choices, taking the center stage. If anyone made this far, and if you would like to see more videos of this nature where I dissect a chapter of PGR, let me know. It probably won't be in this format where I go over every nook and cranny, because this is very, very taxing. I've been working on this for months. So yeah, that's it.